Welcome, everyone. I am John Ryan. This is the NBA NCAA basketball triple-double show with my good friend and pal and co-host Rob Veno at Rob Veno Sports, as you can see on the screen, and also a legend over at WagerTalk.com. He's one of two guys that had been back-to-back NBA champion at WagerTalk. He did it at WagerTalk, and some guy named John Ryan did it in the NFL and NBA over at that sportsmemo.com site. So, humbly stated, on my behalf at least, I think we'll bring a lot to the table today, and hopefully you learn something. And if anything, maybe we'll give you a couple good ideas to consider betting in the days ahead with the NBA and tonight's NCAA card. Welcome to the show, Rob. How is everything going with you?
Yeah, it's a busy time of year, John, obviously. Super Bowl ends and you look up and you're 2.5 weeks away from low major conference tournaments in college basketball. So if it gets difficult in this industry to pay attention to everything at the same time, but you almost have to be ready to roll. Otherwise, it just, like a wave overwhelms you. But it's a good, you don't do it if you don't love it. So it's nice to have a little break from the NBA, I will say, for these last six days or so, right? Because I get back on board on Thursday. So a little chance to catch up with some other stuff. And these seasons, I don't know, I just don't remember them overlapping as rapidly as they do nowadays. But again, you do it because you love to do it. And we, big on making money around here. So you got to stay on top of things.
That is kind of the thing. It's just win, baby, right? As the legendary Al Davis had said so many times, just win, baby, and we don't have a problem. Let's speaking of the NBA, let's start with the 76ers here, a team that is definitely in a flux, to say the least. A little bit of volatility going on the franchise with Joel Embiid being sidelined. We're not really sure exactly when he's going to be back. Rumors are speculating that it'll be 2 weeks before the end of the season, possibly, or maybe not at all. But the first question I have for you, Robin, you're kind of an insider here with the NBA stuff. Do you think the Sixers did enough with the trade deadline moves to keep them out of that play-in situation? Because I think that's a monumental accomplishment. If they are able to stay out of that and have Embiid back, they could be a team that makes a deep run. But what do you think about the whole thing that they did ahead of the trade deadline to help offset the loss of Embiid?
Yeah, the moves that they made, John, are, in my estimation, they're playoff-related moves. Whether they can. I'm going to say this. I don't think that for Philadelphia it matters much if they avoid the play-in, because at full strength, even as a play-in team, the Lakers showed this last year when they got a little bit of advancement, and Philadelphia is certainly a better team than last year's Lakers are. But at full strength, the 76ers, from what we're seeing out of the East right now, are one of the two best teams in that particular conference. They're better than Milwaukee. When Philadelphia's at full strength, remember when Embiid's back, they're probably not quite Boston. They're better than Miami. They're better than any other team in that conference other than Boston. As to what they did, I just like the fact that they added shooters. I mean, Buddy Hield's going to be a huge addition to that team. They needed perimeter shooting. That depth rotation for the Sixers, and with quality players, and again, we're prefacing this with Embiid back in the lineup and at full strength, but their rotation goes 9 deep with quality, and they can roll into the playoffs with the type of diversity as far as where you can score from on offense, inside, outside, free throw line, multiple ways. It all comes down to the defensive end. I think Nick Nurse is an excellent playoff coach, and that will be an asset as well. So for me, I think they did very well at the trade deadline, but everything is so contingent upon how Joel comes back. It's a shame that it happened again. It's a shame that they felt the need to run him out there in that 5-game road stretch where he wound up getting hurt against Golden State. They took a lot of flack for not playing him against Denver in that matchup with Jokic, which was nationally televised. And I think they might have just felt some pressure and pushed him out there. But I'm all in on the 76ers being one of the two best teams in the East when all said and done, as long as Joel, don't rush them. Let them come back, and wherever they land, they land. I don't think it's necessarily a problem for Philadelphia if they end up as a playing team.
Yeah, it's just what, 2 more games. They have to win 2 out of 3, right? And then they're in as one of the lower seeds. But yeah, that could be to their advantage. Come to think of it, what if they do have to face Milwaukee in the first round and they knock them off? Then the road might become a little bit easier for them than if they were the 3 seed or even the 4 seed. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, brackets mean everything, right? Yeah, brackets mean everything. I mean, you don't want to catch Boston right away. You don't want to finish as the 8th team, the last team in and catch Boston right away. But Milwaukee, the problematic team in all of this, John, could be the Cavaliers. That's a team that's very, very good. That's a team that's got a lot of continuity now, a lot of cohesiveness. They've got size. They've got backcourt play. They've got playoff experience. They could be somewhat problematic, as could, it come to think of it, the Knicks, when they get all their guys back, could be a little bit problematic as well. Still, all that being said, with the pieces and the backcourt that Philadelphia acquired, they just seem to be in pretty good shape. As long as you can we're talking about the league's MVP here, right? And that's a big deal. That's a big deal when you're talking about a guy of that stature that the conference itself has no answer for. So we'll see. Hopefully the health is good for Joel and they can get back to doing what they do.
And it brought to mind the 65-game rule that they put in. I still think that was one of the most brainless things ever considered for the NBA. If you're a writer and you're voting for the MVP and a player's been out as much as Embiid, you don't need to have a guideline of 65 games to discount the fact that the player was not playing as many games as, say, a Jokic or another person, even a Jason Tatum, who's playing just about every game. I think that goes into voting, and I don't think we needed to have this 65-game thing as a hurdle that you have to play all these games no matter what to qualify to even be considered the MVP. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think, again, they instituted that because they don't like the idea of load management. So instead of these coaches sitting guys for 20 games, let's force them to play 65 so the fans get to see them. You know what? If you play 58 and you're not hurt and you play, the entire 82-game season, you play 58, 59, they'd probably hold that against you in voting anyway. So it's tough where that criteria is concerned. But I think the eye test tells you that when he went down, he was by far the leading candidate to win that award. Now it'll go to somebody else, obviously. And, for Joel, I don't know, individual awards aside, John, unless you're a true fan of the team and it makes a difference to you, I don't think Joel is concerned about individual awards anymore. He wants the bigger prize. And the bigger prize is get healthy, make a playoff run, get that, monkey off their back, because it's been a while for Philly, right? Trust the process all the way through till now. So we'll see. I do like their chances, though. If he gets healthy, they've got as much as anybody.
Yeah, I agree. Lastly, with the NBA, the Sixers are right now a 1-point favorite, and I actually hope they stay a favorite or pick them, because there's a nice little betting system that supports them, and it's simple to understand. You're playing on home favorites, including pick, after they have lost 5 or 6 of their last 7 games, have a winning record on the season, and playing another winning record team. That has gone 75% against the spread over the last 5 seasons on 47 bets made. And if it's a divisional matchup, it gets even better at 82%. So maybe this is an opportunity with all the rest for the Sixers to really get the game plan together. I mean, they are practicing. It's not like they're sitting around on a sofa during these days. They're going over strategy and all kinds of stuff. At least I hope they are. And I hope for all the teams that they're making use of this time, because it would be a pretty bad product if they didn't. But that does support the Sixers for Thursday night. I guess we'll move on to college hoops now. And we're getting to that point, like you said earlier in the show, that the work begins now for guys like us. And the work begins for these coaches of these teams that are on the bubble and the teams that are considered the first four in, the first four out. I see Villanova as a team right now that's one of the first four out. However, even though the record isn't all that impressive, they played one of the toughest schedules of all the teams in the land, certainly a top 10 schedule, and I think that's going to help them a lot. But how far do they need to advance, Rob, in the Big East tournament to get in, where you would say, yeah, they're going to be in, they're going to be the 9 seed, for example, in the East?
Well, it's going to have to come with a victory over one of. It's got to come with a Marquette victory. It's got to come with a Creighton victory. It's got to come with a UConn victory, right? It just can't be going through. And I don't know how the bracket's going to break, but it can't be going through a side of the bracket which features, an upset underdog that advanced as well. They're going to have to beat somebody. The good news for Villanova is, and they've kind of found their identity again in these last 4 games. Defensively, they have been an absolute nightmare for opponents. 50 points to Providence, 56 points allowed to Xavier, 54 points allowed to Seton Hall, 54 points again to Georgetown. And at this point, 4 consecutive games of holding teams to 56 or less in that league, I think you got to stand up and notice that maybe Kyle Neptune has, got them back to where low possession, grind out games. They're not a good shooting team by any means, so they have to kind of win this way. It's different than past years where they could shoot it, where they could score inside and out. It's a different type of team, but the defense has really picked up. It's something that was holding them back earlier, along with the bad shooting. You can't have that combo. You're not going to win any games. But if you can stop the opponent from scoring, and their choice at this point in time, the way to do it is to slow the games down, way down. And we'll see tonight. You got a little bit of movement toward the under. Started 140 against an offensive-minded Butler team, down to 139. If you take a check of those 4 games that I just rattled off, you could probably equate Butler and their offensive mindset and their need for tempo to what Xavier is. Xavier likes tempo. Xavier's offensive-minded, not that great on the defensive end. So Villanova held that team to 56 and still lost 56-53 to Xavier. So we'll see if they can score enough tonight. But I do like the direction their defense is heading, and you have to like them a lot if they can continue winning and then produce, 1 or 2 big wins against these 3 teams that are atop of that league. That league really has formed some separation too. It looks like Connecticut, Marquette, and Creighton in the beginning of the season. I thought, wow, this is a tough league top to bottom. It's not really that tough of a league top to bottom. It's 3 teams and then pretty much the rest.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting to note, too, you mentioned the defensive prowess of Villanova. Seemingly coming out of the last 4 games, they gave up 85 in a 5-point loss to Marquette back on January 30th. But the 4 games they played in February, they allowed 50 in an 18-point win at home over Providence, which is a pretty good team. Villanova they lost to Xavier 53-56 on the road, allowing only 56. They allowed 54 in a 16-point win over Seton Hall, and by the same margin defeated Georgia Tech, who also scored. I'm sorry, they won by 16. They beat Seton Hall by 26, not 16. I'm terrible with numbers. Anybody who knows me, they'd be laughing right now if I said that. But seriously, their defense has been outstanding, and playing at home, they're only a 6.5-point favorite here. Seems like the market is doubting their sustainability, if you will. But I think I like Villanova with you, Rob. I think that is a good bet for tonight, especially live in-game, because scoring volatility has been like no other season. You have these ups and downs that are just kind of crazy, especially in the NBA, where scoring has just gone up through the roof. I mean, that All-Star game almost made 400 points. I mean, can you imagine betting a game, Rob, over the game total is 364 and a half? Oh, I'm taking the over for sure. I can't get my mindset to wrap around that idea in a 48-minute game, all star or not, that I'm going to bet even in a regular season game, let's say 260. I can't imagine a 135 game because you and I are from the time where, the Miami Heat, allowed like 74 points a game. Um, but anyway, I mean, the scoring has gone up here quite a bit. So point is, I got off track there, is that in a game like this, you may be able to get Villanova at 3.5 and then maybe a pick. So I've been advising clients bet 70% pre-flop, 15% at -3.5, and then the rest of it at pick or even -1.5 on Nova. I think that's a good strategy for tonight.
Yeah, I think it's hard. Again, laying 6 points with Villanova would be tough for me just because you can't trust their offense. But I do see a direct correlation to these unders with that defense. I mean, those games that I mentioned in February where they've held the opponent to 56 or less, if you're going to hold, and the Butler game the first time around was 88-81, scored 169 points. However, the first time that they played Marquette, it was 165 as well, and then 161 follows. It's hard to tell. The second time around, John, in these conference games, general line of thought is that you've seen a team once, their playbook, defense takes hold in February. And it seems to me that this shift that Kyle Neptune has put on the team, the emphasis on slow and defensive end, probably lends itself to under. You're talking about a game that would have to hit, and if you're just going to use 6-point number here, it's got to go 73-67 to hit 140 and beat you. And Nova has shown no sign of allowing anybody near 67 in the month of February. So probably the people who chipped away at under here could be right. You have to hope Butler doesn't explode because that's what they do best. But Butler's on a little bit of a losing streak here. And, when you're 12, 13 games into the conference grind and it's a league like the Big East, again, I understand my feeling that, there's three really, really good teams and the rest of the league, but it's still a grind when you're 13 games in a league like the Big East. And the fatigue sets in, and maybe Butler's fading at this point in time. So it's all this proactive stuff and thoughts that we go through in order to placing bets, in order to recommending to clients. I would think the best way to look at this one from what I'm seeing is under 139, 139.5.
Yeah, I like that. I like that take too. I think I might actually like that better than the Villanova bet because that makes perfect sense to me. Maybe the offense is a little off tonight because they've been playing well too. One game I want to talk about here before we conclude the show, and I'm sure everybody else is dying to know, is UConn has 2 losses. I still think Purdue and Houston are better teams. We saw what Houston did last night. At the beginning of that game, Iowa State had 7 points, I believe, and there was less than 10 minutes to go in the half. They are just unreal on the defensive end, and so is Iowa State. And somehow that game got going in the second half. The Houston kid scored most of his points, the 26 that he scored in the second half. But those 2 teams bring the defensive load in a big way. UConn claims that they have a team that's better, and they have every right to do so. But I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to have their 3rd loss tonight, having to go to Creighton, who is going to be really, really kind of hungry to take them down on their home court. They're only a 2.5-point dog. Do you think the line's right, or do you think this is possibly a great opportunity on UConn at 2.5, given that they've only lost twice?
I'd probably lean towards UConn, just because everything Creighton's going to bring to the table, UConn has, and then some. The problem with these types of games, and this one out in Creighton, John, when you're flying from Storrs, Connecticut to Omaha, Nebraska, it's just not a normal road trip for UConn. Now Creighton's been in the league a couple of years, and they're somewhat used to it. I would say this, that for Creighton, with Baylor Shireman and their shooters, and with Kalkbrenner at center, they have unique stuff that other teams in the Big East don't have as far as offensive and defensive capabilities are concerned. However, UConn's that one team that has all of that and then some. And remember, when they played the first time, UConn beat this team by 14 points without Donovan Clingan. He was hurt. And so now you're sticking the 7-2 guy back into the lineup against Kalkbrenner. Kalkbrenner didn't have an amazing day the first time. I mean, Creighton scored 48 points without Clingan in the middle. UConn actually, during that stretch of 6 games, Danny Hurley decided to go small. Alex Caravan played a lot of center. He's only a power forward. And they survived it. So I just don't know that Creighton's on the level. If Creighton's going to win, it's because they're at home and the home atmosphere wins the game, which happens an awful lot in college basketball. But is Creighton a 3-point, within 3 points of UConn personnel roster-wise? I mean, I would take UConn's roster every day. I would take it over Purdue's. I would take it over Houston. So I don't see Creighton as being a better team. But again, we know you handicap college basketball enough, and you understand that road trips and home atmospheres can mean a lot. The one thing I'll say about Danny Hurley in Connecticut is that they just haven't shown any sign of let up. I mean, there's a lot of games where some people still do, John. They call them trap games. They call them sandwich games. They call them whatever they are. UConn a couple of weeks ago rolls into Georgetown as a double-digit favorite with absolutely nothing to gain. It's a perfect spot to just not be focused, not be motivated, lay down. And they destroyed the team from start to finish. So I think Danny Hurley's got the team's ear. He's got them focused. He's got them motivated. It'll be a difficult task for the Creighton Blue Jays tonight. They certainly have the guys to do it. But when it comes Big East tournament time, I don't see any of those teams in that league. We just saw it against Marquette the other night, right? Marquette got destroyed, and they had moved up. Shaka Smart's team, they were top 10, maybe. I don't follow the rankings a lot, but I know they had moved up, and they just got it handed to them because UConn was focused. And as for, I'll just get back to the other two teams real quick. When March Madness comes around, Matt Painter's not getting any of my money. I mean, he was I think the committee released their top 16 Saturday afternoon, and by Sunday afternoon, he had already lost and fell out of the number 1 spot, right? They were number 1 in those top 16 seedings. It took him 12 hours to blow that. That's a good basketball team, but he's not going to win anything in March. There'll be no one shining moment for him. And Houston basically is the same exact Houston team that's been there for 5 years now under Kelvin Sampson. 6 guys deep, 7 guys deep, play a lot of defense, but in the tourney, they always throw a game at you where they're 2 for 21 from 3 and go out because they can't shoot it well enough. And the Houston home court isn't allowed in the NCAA tournament, so they're a little short too. They'll probably, they're a Sweet 16 and Elite 8, but I don't know that they could win a title.
Yeah, I agree. One last question here to discuss quickly before I let you go. Grand Canyon seems to be the darling of certainly the public bettor or the public fan, whatever you want to call it. They seem to be the darlings this year, the Cinderella, if you will. But I had an interesting scenario. What if they don't win the WAC and they get beat by, say, Tarleton State, who I think is probably the only team that can beat them? If there's a conference looking like the Big East in terms of having one team that just dominates everybody else, it's probably the WAC, where Grand Canyon has steamrolled a lot of the weaker opponents, and it's not a very strong conference to begin with. But what does the committee do then? If, let's say, hypothetically, Tarleton State is the conference winner, they get in, but then you're sitting there with a Grand Canyon team possibly with 26 wins by then. Are they going to put them in, or are they going to take a team that went pretty deep in an SEC tournament or a Big Ten or the Big 12, where I think 10 teams will get in the tournament from the Big 12? That is by far the toughest conference in all of the United States right now. There's no denying it. So what do you think the committee would do? Do you think they would not be in just simply because they couldn't win a weak conference?
these situations are always interesting, right? Because if you're Grand Canyon, you wind up rooting for opponents that you've already played as much as you wind up rooting for yourself to win games. You go back on Grand Canyon's schedule, the teams they beat that are any good are San Diego State and San Francisco. If San Francisco were to beat St. Mary's tonight, Grand Canyon's rating goes up. Not because of anything they did, but because of something San Francisco did, and they beat San Francisco. If San Diego State wins the Mountain West Conference championship, which is a really good conference this year, then Grand Canyon's stock goes up because San Diego State won, not because Grand Canyon did anything. So it really is crazy how you wind up rooting for opponents that you've beaten as much as you have to win games yourself. They're both equal on the priority list. Not a bad loss, but a loss to a good team with South Carolina. So, I mean, proponents would say, well, they played a Power 5 team that's, I guess top echelon for SEC play. South Carolina's had a great year this year, but you couldn't beat them. And so, the criteria is always so loose every year, John, right? They backfit their arguments to whatever their decisions are. Their arguments are not always the same every year. That's why, even though they let 68 teams in, there's still 5 moaning and groaning that they should have been in ahead of somebody in that field. But I think Grand Canyon, all Bryce Drew can do with his team is you got to win games and you got to hope for the best out of San Francisco and San Diego State. Lucky for them, Grand Canyon, that the Mountain West is such a good league this year. San Diego State's got a big game tonight, right? They go to Utah State. Yep. If they can win that. So I guess it's twofold tonight for Grand Canyon. They're huge San Francisco fans on the road against St. Mary's. They're huge San Diego State fans on the road at Utah State. Those 2 wins would boost Grand Canyon's number a little bit high. That makes their wins look better, right?
Yeah. And it could be a situation where if they let Grand Canyon in, not let them, if they give them a bid, even though they didn't win the WAC, that could knock out a team like a Villanova or a Seton Hall or a Utah or a Providence. So that's where it really gets interesting, I think, too, for those teams that are going to feel slighted.
And, I think real quick here, Indiana State last week was kind of in this similar situation. Indiana State had cracked the top 25 for the first time since Larry Bird was on the team. And, you start thinking in the Missouri Valley Conference Arch Madness, if they don't win it, will they still be allowed or will they still be accepted into the 68-team field? And then they went out and blew 2 straight games. So they hindered themselves. Now they have to win a conference tournament. But these mid-major conferences and these low-major conferences, it's become even harder for them this year because I think I don't know, I could have the time span wrong, but 3, 4, 5 years in a row now, the NIT, the next best tournament, has said if you're a mid-major or if you're a low major and you win your regular season, regardless of what you do in the conference tournament, you're in the NIT. This year, they threw that rule in the garbage. So now you could actually be Indiana State and win regular season, not even get invited to the NIT. You wind up down somewhere, I don't know, CBI, something, CIT, whatever still exists as a tournament. Kind of an all or nothing, eggs in one basket type of deal here. So it'll be interesting for Grand Canyon. I'm sure that here's one thing I would guarantee you, John. If Grand Canyon got into the NCAA tournament and the night of the selection show, Grand Canyon got announced, every single one of those media pundits that you see on TV that night will tell you that Grand Canyon's going to advance 3 rounds, 2-3 rounds, because they love to latch on to something, just hope it sticks to the wall, and say they were right there knowing about Grand Canyon. It's a good basketball team. It's a good defensive basketball team. And for what it's worth, they've been playing without one of their star players for the last 3-4 games. It's still winning. So Bryce Drew's got something going on there.
Yeah, no question. Well, I guess we'll do a show best bet. Out of the show here, I really like that under Villanova tonight that you discussed. I'm on board with that. I would also advise maybe some live in-game betting because it's very rare that you get a total of 139.5 or any total that just goes always in your favor. In other words, there's no runs that make the line go against you, so to speak, where you would lose the bet. So, maybe it does happen and it becomes a very low scoring game. But doing maybe 70% pre-flop at 139.5, then 15% more at 143.5, and then 146.5 for the balance of the 15%. That's how I'm planning on playing it right now. So what is your best bet, Rob?
You know what? For show purposes, John, I would say that I'll go to the SEC early start here. Arkansas goes to A&M. This game's been bet up to 11.5 now. And it's hard to lay 11.5 with a team like A&M that's so sporadic offensively in and out. But I think they're the right side here tonight. The matchup would dictate it. Texas A&M goes to Alabama last Saturday and absolutely gets destroyed. Alabama hits three-pointer after three-pointer after three-pointer, score 100 some odd points, and send A&M packing back home. And so you expect a hostile environment here out of A&M in College Station tonight. It helps that the team they're going to play tonight is the worst offensive team in the SEC out of 14 teams. It helps that the team they're going to play is the second worst defensive team or third worst defensive team in the SEC. And it helps A&M that Arkansas comes into this game without their 2-6-10 guys. And if there's anything A&M does well, it's hit the glass. They're a strong rebounding and defense type team. Shooting has avoided them at times this year, more often than not. But when they get an opponent that they can just throw it up and hit the glass and hit the glass and hit the glass and get second chance points, they're a really good basketball team. Their defense and their defensive rebounding, the way they can get you to just shoot one and outs, is helpful as well. Arkansas is a team that's lost all season long. I don't know that this is a great environment for them to be coming into. And I think that defense could be what you would call the perfect elixir for a bad A&M offense. They look at that thing and they're like, wow, we could score against these guys, even if it is on stickbacks, offensive rebound, putbacks, free throws, whatever. I'm willing to lay 11.5 here. It looks to me like a game where Buzz Williams' team probably can go out there and, hold the other side to 60 or less, maybe get you a 77-60 type win. So 11.5 might look big when it comes to A&M, but tonight, just due to the matchup, I think it's not. So I'll take Texas A&M full game minus the 11.5.
Love it. Love the breakdown. You always do the best breakdowns in the business, I swear. Second to none. Before we end the show, tell us what's going on with you and WagerTalk. Any special promotions, packages, anything you want to say? The stage is yours.
Yeah, if you're interested, you can find all my work over at WagerTalk.com. I would say this to your audience, John, if you're currently not a member over there, it's free. I mean, just go over there and drop your email address. You get instant free access to all the video content. If you like the shows that John does for you here, you can also get this type of advice from WagerTalk's team each and every day in all sports, NHL, NBA, whatever's going on, college basketball, it doesn't matter. I mean, we've got guys that are covering darts and bare knuckle fighting. So you get whatever you want analyzed over at WagerTalk.com for free. If you're interested in selection packages, mine are always available tonight as well over there at WagerTalk.com on my homepage. So I'd encourage everybody, if nothing else, just to drop an email address and just say, if you're going to make your own bets, maybe you get a couple of points of analysis on a daily basis that help you one way or the other. Once again, WagerTalk.com.
Very good, Rob. Well, we'll be looking forward to another show here with the NBA and NCAA basketball triple-double. I'm glad you had the time to meet with me. Maybe we'll make this a regular Tuesday if it works for your schedule. I am putting together a panel of shows Monday through Friday that will have essentially the same people on the show every single day of that week. So if you find a show that you really like the guest on, that you can keep coming back and know that he's going to be there. So say Rob Veno Tuesdays 4:00 or Tuesdays 3:30. I know I can count on his advice because I really like what he does and he makes me money. Then you know when he's going to be on. So hopefully that's going to work for everybody, and we're going to make this thing really explode in growth. We had 15,000 views the last show last week, and just hope to keep earning your time to watch the shows. We really appreciate it. So until the next show, Rob, thank you very much. And remember the two simple things. Just bet with your head and not over it. And may all the wins be yours.